Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me along. And it's very similar to what Jay has been talking about in respect of what we're trying to do over at Woodhall Spa Airfield. We're doing very similar practices, doing very similar things, trying to get people involved with helping us do these things. Now, if you can, I'm hoping, oh, right. If you can probably see that there is Woodhall Spa Airfield, and we've got 500 acres there. The trust used to manage this small area here that we leased for about 7 or 8 years, but it wasn't until 2016 that we managed to raise the 1.2 million to buy the other 400 acres. The reason why we wanted the airfield was, one, yes, from a nature conservation point of view, nature reserves are too small. We've got to try and make them bigger to make them more robust against climate change and pressure. As you can see on the map here, we're surrounded by intensive agriculture and conurbations and building sites and holiday homes and things. But there was also, because it's Lincolnshire and it's 617 Squadron's home, the idea of being able to try and hold on to a piece of history was more than the trust could ever dream of. So this is really why we tried to buy Woodhall Spa Airfield. Now the site itself backs onto, this is Kirkby Moor Triple SI, which goes onto the road. We recently purchased a small woodland there, which links onto Moor Farm Triple SI. So we've got 2 Triple SIs. It's about 1,000 acres plus several other satellite reserves that we've got in the area. So it totals around about 1,500 acres. And I think we had 2 main objectives with what we wanted to do at Woodhall Spa. One, yes, it's a nature reserve, but 2, we are safeguarding the future of the airfield, the history of the airfield, what's gone before us with in relating to the squadrons that were based there, and trying to hold it onto it to make sure it's safe for the future, because there was lots of people interested in buying the airfield and developing it. And aggregate industries were managing the airfield for about 40 years. And when we managed to buy it, the first thing that they wanted to do, or asked us, would you like us to rip up all of the runways and take it away from you? And we said, no, keep the runways. The runways are the most important thing on the site because it's preserving the history of the site. So I'll try and move on a slide, and hopefully, yeah, there we go. I've just listed on there a bit of the history of the site. Now you can probably read through there the various squadrons, 617, 619, 627, 222 squadrons and things. And we've got along the bottom here, we've got Bomber Command, Mosquito. Guy Gibson was last seen at Woodhall Spa before his fateful mission where he left and didn't come back. Now, a lot of the runways have gone. We've still got the main runway that runs up here, and we've still got the bomb store, which is where the tall boys and the Grand Slams were kept. And as I say, we're trying to preserve every part of the runway and the airfield that we can, and managing it as a nature reserve. So I'm sure you're all familiar with all these things, but you know, there's the Tirpitz on the top left there, the various squadrons from Lincolnshire took out, the V2 bases that 617 helped in taking out in the Pathfinder missions, the Blierfeld viaducts, and on the bottom right there, there's one of these tall boys. And it's amazing to think they had to strip out the whole innards of the plane just to get these Grand Slams and tall boy bombs tucked in there. And the chairman of 617 Squadron still comes to Woodhall, and he was a rear gunner on a Lancaster. And he said, war is an absolute terrifying thing to be a part of, but almost as bad was trying to get the planes off the ground in Woodhall when you had one of those bombs on the back, because he was a rear gunner. And it took about the full length of the full runway to get these planes off the ground. And being a rear gunner and being 6'5", he was inches away from the tarmac as these things took off. So now when we took over, this is what we were left with. Cemex left the site, and basically just left masses and masses of aggregate and rubble there. Now, the bottom right hand, we were fortunate enough to have some machinery left over for 4 days, and we had to move all of this rubbish in 4 days. We weren't allowed to sell it because of the planning regulations, because of the potential of contamination in the soil. So we thought we might be able to sell it and make some money out of it to put into start restoring the grasslands on the runways and things, but we couldn't do that. So we were left with all of this, and we had to try and do our best to clear it. Now, it took us a year, but eventually we managed to clear all of the rubbish that was left on there. Now, you've got the old perimeter track running down here. There's a couple of bits of perimeter track. Here's the sort of east-west runway. Here's the main runway running down. And the other east-west runway, which is this one over here, is more or less all gone. There's still some of the Lancaster dispersal pads that we've kept. And this is looking down the main runway from the main gate. Now, when we first took over, we initially wanted to get the visitor infrastructure right. So we put on some bird hides. We made a visitor car park. We've got 2 viewpoints for people to access, disabled access paths and things. We've also started to build our own farmyard there, because when you're managing large grasslands, the larger the grassland you've got, the more expensive it is to manage it. Jay was talking about going out and managing these sites. We do sell some of our seeds to wildflower companies. We sell some of the hay that we cut. We also manufacture green hay that we give to other farmers to help reseed their grasslands and things. But we've also had to use livestock. So we started to build our own farm system. And unfortunately, this one here, we had to put security locks on our gates. Now, the main runway is accessible to anyone. They just need that access gate code to get in. But as soon as we bought the place, we had 4-wheel drive vehicles, motorcycles getting in there, churning up the place. So we had to put these keypads in, and you have to phone up head office to get the keypad numbers for people to get in. And we've also got the old Victorian farmhouse here that we're trying to turn into a training centre for students, and we are going to run courses at how nature conservation can be married up with modern farming, or I should have said farming in the 1940s, because that's what we're trying to do on Woodhall Spa Airfield. We're using traditional breeds like Lincoln Reds, and we're not using herbicides, we're not using pesticides, which is the intensification of agriculture. What Jay alluded to earlier has brought about this massive decline in wildflowers. So what we've got here, first of all, we put fences up down the edges of the runway. So in years to come, everyone can see where the original runways were. And then we use Lincoln Reds, which is on the left-hand side here, Highland horses, Highland ponies, and pedigree Hebridean sheep to graze the site. And basically, we just open the gates and let them graze wherever they want to. They dictate how the habitat develops, because you can't use machinery on big sites like this, because it's not sustainable. You can't use pet diesel tractors. You can't pay staff to do it. We have to pay these environmental engineers to do it all themselves. Now, I have the luxury of a disused airfield, so I don't need to worry about planes and things coming in and landing, because we have a lot of wildfowl here. Now, we've got, on the top left there, we've got some old lagoons that we've modelled to get birds to come in. We've got hay meadows that we use to feed our livestock with. And more often than not, if you're trying to increase the diversity in your hay meadows, particularly, I would say, around your airfields, something that you could possibly do is not do anything. Jay had put out a photograph of Coventry Airport being absolutely hammered with mowing, and that will kill off all your wildflowers. But in the seedbed, these plants will still be lying dormant. And I often say this with education trips with kids from schools. just get your mother or your father not to cut your back grass in your garden for 1 year, and you will have a wealth of wildflowers come up there. And it's just amazing what comes up there. Now, in the middle, we've got some settling beds that aggregate industries used for trying to wash the sand out of. If you're using water to clean aggregates, you can't discharge it back into the watercourse because it's full of contaminants and sand and things. So they had to run them through some reed beds. So we've reworked the reed beds, getting them up and running again. The perimeter track that we've got around the outside is also one of the most valuable habitats that we've got. The runways themselves, this plant in the bottom is something called biting stonecrop, and it's a succulent. It's a plant that you would usually find in a very arid, dry environment, but it's all over the runways, all over the runways. On the right-hand side, we've got scrub. Down in the middle, we've got wet grassland. We've got about 300 acres of grassland. None of this is cut for hay. All of this is just grazed by our livestock, and it's amazing what plants will come up there. We've not reseeded any of this. For 40 years, this part of the reserve was just grazed with white commercial sheep, and it was grazed down to a billiard table. And all we did was stop grazing it as hard as that, and we've allowed the wildlife to come back. We've got cranes coming back, we've got various sorts of wildlife, we've got various deers that naturally graze the site, and all we do is manage our livestock to take care of it. And then we've got the military side. As I said earlier, our two objectives is, one, to manage a nature reserve, but two, to safeguard the future of all the structures and various other things that we've got on the site. So we've got, top left is a Romney shelter that we've just restored. Bottom left is the arrestor gear that used to be, that was trialled at Woodhall Spa. Now this arrestor gear is in the centre at the bottom there. That's me sitting down looking in this pool. This arrestor gear was a large cable that would run across the runway, and the tension on the cable would be put on depending on what plane was landing. If a plane had been shot up and it was struggling to land, they would drop a hook out of the back of the plane and be captured by the wire, very similar to what you get on aircraft boats, where they're landing on it. This was pioneered at Woodhall Spa. Unfortunately, it took quite a while to work it out, the tension, and more often than not, the planes had their tails ripped off by this wire as they came down. But it was ultimately successful at the end. At the top, we've got Thorpe Camp, which is where all the barracks were for all the airmen at 617 Squadron and all the other squadrons that were here. And we work in partnership with them. We've also got volunteers living on site, and we've got a porter cabin and a small building behind it, which was the breathing apparatus shed that we're trying to restore. And in the bottom right hand side is it's a bomb essentially. It's a £500 runway busting bomb. And so the story goes, a Heinkel was being chased with 5 of these across towards Woodhall Spa to bomb the airfield, and these bombs were armed at altitude. And the guy in the Heinkel thought, I'm not going to get shot down with these 5 bombs. So he dropped them and chased away over towards Boston, where the 2 Spitfires chased him off. And about 15 years ago, one of our contractors was cleaning out one of our ditches, and he thought he found a massive lump of wood, and he pulled it out, and it was an unexploded £500 Airfield bomb. So the guy gently put it down on the runway. I imagine he went home to change his underwear afterwards. And then the bomb squad came down and blew it up, and that's what was left. And I mounted that onto the centre of the runway as a reminder that the runway itself was bombed 6 times. 458 people lost their lives at Woodhall Spa, both pilots and air crew. And over 150 gallantry awards were awarded to the pilots here. So finally, this was the memorial, Anne, that you were talking about that's now at Woodhall Spa. And we've got Johnny Johnson from 617 Squadron there. It's a really wonderful place to work. You've got wildlife that is returning. You've got wildflowers that are returning. We're trying to do it in a sustainable way. And there are times when you can walk down that airfield and the Coningsby Lancaster is flying around and the hairs on the back of your neck go up, and it's a really emotive place to be and to work. And it is our job. It is what we should be doing. We should be preserving this site for everyone to come and enjoy for now and forever. So that, I believe, is the end of my talk, and I feel as if I should have put far more wildlifey things in, and I'm terribly sorry, but thank you very much indeed.